Bette Davis sat down and spat out the words she had been swallowing for 50 years when she was 81 years old. Her body was weak from strokes and cancer, but her heart was strong. Her fight with Joan Crawford was famous in Hollywood, but when she talked about how ugly she was, how she was betrayed, how mean she was, and how cold her anger still burned in her eyes, people gasped. Even though she was getting old, she wouldn't let her truth go unsaid. Think of a young woman who is about to do something great. That's how Bette Davis got out of being unknown. She just kept at it. A woman who didn't want to be anyone else's gift. She had to deal with directors who said she wasn't pretty enough and studio executives who wanted to cast her in boring parts. Finally, she got the lead role in a movie she thought would make her famous. Ex-Lady was coming out in April 1933 from Warner Brothers. The company told her she would be the hot new actress, making her come out of the shadows. She went to sleep the night before the press campaign started, looking forward to seeing her face in every newspaper the next morning. She didn't see any pictures of herself in the morning paper. It was all over the news that Joan Crawford and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. were filing for divorce. The press run was taken over by Crawford's personal life. I'd say it was done on purpose, like a well-planned blow to the face. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer already loved Crawford. She was a beautiful star with thick eyebrows and big eyes who knew how to deal with the press like a seasoned politician. Bette was an actress who had trained on the stage and put skill over looks. But that moment, she learned a painful truth. In Hollywood, looks were more important than art. Instead of getting a lot of attention for the first time, she was just talked about a lot. About a woman she didn't know very well. It hurt, and the pain didn't go away. Bette took that slight personally. She could have said it was just bad timing, but she thought it was on purpose. She told her friends that she thought Crawford had timed the news to make her competitor's movie release look small. Bette thought this was a very competitive move. After that, she kept a close eye on Crawford. Both women wanted to get ahead and were very strong in a world dominated by men. One was praised for how pretty she was, while the other was made fun of for being honest. There would be a huge gap between the movie star and the serious actor. What began as a stolen story turned into a grudge over time. The next betrayal was not only at work, it was also very close to home. The main scandal made people angry, and the events of 1935 fed that anger with shame and sadness. Bette worked with the charming actor Frank Tone on the movie Dangerous, which was a loan to RKO. He was smart, good-looking, and nice to her in a way that few men had been. Bette really liked him. She would drink coffee with him and tell him jokes between takes. She told a friend that she saw herself with this man in the future. She didn't know that Joan Crawford had her eye on him. Crawford had fancy meals for Tone at her house, where she served champagne and caviar and enjoyed her own beauty. The next thing Bette knew, the man she loved had felt the same way about Crawford. They got married in October 1935, just a few days after Bette told everyone she loved him. That marriage turned out very badly. She lost more than one man. Crawford had taken him from her, like she took news stories from other people. The shame kept going on at a time when Bette should have been winning. She was nominated for her first Academy Award in 1936 for her role as Joyce Heath. In Risky, Warner Brothers didn't want to pay for her fancy dress because they wanted to punish her for breaking the rules of her contract the year before. Bette, always rebellious, chose an unflattering dress with no shape to show her displeasure. There was a time when she won the Oscar and looked like she was carrying a flower basket. Joan Crawford walked out into the crowd wearing a dress that showed off all of her curves. She gave Frank a kiss on the cheek and slid up to Bette. What a pretty dress. The press laughed at how Crawford's dress was so fancy and Davis's dress so casual. Bette was scared. What should have been her shining moment turned into another public embarrassment, this time planned by the same woman who had made her look bad before. Bette screamed in secret. She told people close to her that the woman who married the man she loved had made fun of her on the most important night of her life. She remembered. She would say that Crawford's insult was one of the meanest things she had ever been told. There was a deeper wound behind the grief. Bette thought that Crawford and Tone's marriage was more about winning than love. That idea, whether it was true or not, made her even more angry. Both women's jobs kept going up, so they kept running into each other more often. Anger turned into open hostility, and the lines of war were drawn. But it looked like there was still time for one more peace try. Around 1943, Joan Crawford's fame had dropped after many years at MGM. She worked out a way out of her contract and surprised everyone in Hollywood by signing with Warner Brothers, Bette's company, and Kingdom. It was thought that putting their two biggest stars under one roof would make money. Crawford seemed eager to ease up on old grudges. She sent Bette pricey flowers. They sent letters and small gifts that might have seemed friendly. Bette saw the trickery. She replied to every gift with a short note, and later she joked that Crawford's advances felt less like friendship and more like attempts to seduce her. Bette thought Joan was trying to get close to her just to switch parts with her. There may or may not have been other reasons for the refusal, but it set the tone for their time at Warner. The couple stayed cold with each other and were only polite in public. The war went from being personal to being business. Warner Brothers was making female parts that were very interesting, and both women wanted them. Bette was known for taking on tough roles. They were plain, complex women who didn't have to be like that. Gossip writers called Crawford the embodiment of glamour, and she wanted to change. She worked very hard to get the lead part in Mildred Pierce. Bette was in the running for it, but directors gave it to Crawford because they didn't like how she was putting them down. This led to Crawford's comeback. In 1946, she won the Ace Award for Best Actress. This made Bette feel worse after already being hurt. She thought she was perfect for the part, but her rival got it instead. Bette's work showed how angry she was. In the 1952 movie The Star, she played an old actor who drinks too much and sleeps on a couch in her agent's office. This role was seen by many as a joke about Crawford's decline. Bette didn't say that it wasn't an idea. You can see Mrs. Crawford in movies. She once said, "I'm an actress." That difference shows how she felt about her foe. One smiled for pictures and went to dinners. The other one turned into characters. Bette said in public that Joan slept her way to the top, and she once yelled that Crawford had slept with every male MGM star except Lassie. Those lines were very funny, but they also showed how angry she was. In a field where women often had to compete with each other for the few important jobs that were available, a system that promoted aggressive behavior made their rivalry even stronger. It looked like they were going to have their worst fight, one that would turn physical. In 1961, both women's careers were on the decline, and the new Golden Girls in Hollywood were younger and less dangerous. What Happened to Baby Jane was the name of the play that Joan Crawford found, about two old sisters who are stuck in a house that is falling apart. She took it to director Robert Aldrich with one condition, because she saw how good it could be. Jane Hudson, the monster baby, has to be played by Bette Davis. Crawford may have hoped that starring with her biggest rival would make for an exciting match that would bring in a lot of fans. Bette agreed the way she saw fit. She would play Jane, Crawford would play Blanche, who was in a lot of pain, and Crawford would not be seeing the director romantically. The way they planned things seemed simple on paper. The set turned into a fight in real life. With a sly grin and a red Coca-Cola bottle in her hand, Bette walked up to the first table. She knew Crawford was married to a Pepsi executive and had joined the board after his death. To poke fun at her, Bette demanded that a Coca-Cola vending machine be put in the studio. Members of the crew howled softly. Crawford got back at them by giving the electricians and workers Pepsi, and by knitting while Bette was on stage. Small things were used by both women to get under the other's skin. People on the set say that they used gifts and compliments to try to win the crew's love, and they both called the director late at night to complain about how rude the other was. Their anger got worse until they were hurt physically. Bette, who played Jane, hit Crawford so hard that Crawford needed stitches in a scene where Jane hits Blanche. When Bette said it was a mistake, Crawford got ready to get back at her. Later, Jane had to pull Blanche across the floor during a scene. Putting weights on under her outfit made Crawford heavier, which made Bette's back hurt when she tried to pull her. After several takes, Bette fell to the ground in pain and yelled obscenities that could be heard all over the set. The crew whispered that they were seeing the physical results of decades of hate. In spite of everything, both women gave gripping performances. Bette's Baby Jane was horrifying and gross, while Crawford's Blanche made people feel sorry for her. Their careers were brought back to life by the hit movie, but the piece on screen hid the war going on behind the scenes. And when it was time for the award season, Joan planned the worst betrayal of all time. Because of how well Whatever Happened to Baby Jane did, it was nominated for an Academy Award. There was a Best Actress award for Bette Davis. Bette saw this as proof that Joan Crawford wasn't who she said she was. She thought her performance was so good that it earned the highest award in the business. and she imagined walking on stage to a roar of cheers. Craig had a different plan. She called all the nominated actresses who couldn't make it to the ceremony, including in Bancroft for The Miracle Worker, and offered to accept their Oscars on their place. Bette didn't know about this. Crawford told them it would be an honor to play their part if they won. It was a smart move that looked like kindness. Bette wore a tight dress to the ceremony and sat in the crowd that night. She had perfectly styled her hair. She had prepared some things to say, but she never got the chance to do so. The camera cut to Crawford backstage when the host opened the envelope and said that and Bancroft had won. She flew past Bette, who was sitting down, in a silver dress that sparkled, and slid onto the stage with a big smile to accept the award. Bette's jaw got tight in front of everyone in Hollywood. The woman who had stolen her boyfriend and the news once stole her attention again. Crawford held the Oscar like it was her own and thanked Bancroft on her behalf. Photographers caught Bette's face as it stood still. Inside, she was ecstasy with shame. She later told her friends that seeing Joan take the stage made her feel sick. That night hurt more than just her pride. It made her even more sure that Crawford would do anything to beat her. After the Oscars, their friendship turned into something really bad. Bette said that Crawford was working against her in public and called her a fake quid behind her back in private, which her co-workers used as an example for years. Crawford said she was only helping nominees who weren't there, but the damage had already been done. Many people in Hollywood know the story of how Crawford stole the Oscar from Bette. Even though it wasn't their last lie, it may have been the most public. Producers in Hollywood, who love debate, were curious if they could use their dislike one more time. It was planned to bring them back together to make sparks fly and make money off of their dislike for each other. They didn't plan for being so tired. The anger from the years was getting worse. Robert Aldrich started making Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte in 1964. It was a Southern Gothic thriller with parts that were perfect for older actresses. He thought that bringing Bette Davis and Joan Crawford back together would bring back the magic of Baby Jane. Both women seemed up for it at first. They were given big contracts and told that another movie would be a big hit. During the first few practices, old grudges came to the surface, but everyone was polite. Then things went badly during the first week of shooting. Bette had never been in charge before, but now that she was a producer on the movie, she was. People on the crew said she changed scenes without telling Crawford and gave her impossible call times. In talks, she said bad things about Crawford's work ethic. Crawford got back at them by pretending to be sick. She went to the hospital and said she had bronchitis and was tired. She wouldn't go back until Bette apologized. Bette said no. It stopped making things for weeks. Insurance companies said they might not pay for the movie. Finally, Aldrich had to replace Crawford with Olivia de Havilland in order to keep the movie going. Crawford's leaving made it possible for the movie to go forward, but it ended her friendship with Bette for good. There was no longer any hope for a calm because of the anger. Bette told a reporter that she felt better. "I won't have to drag that jerk across the floor ever again." Crawford was nice to Davis in public, but swore to himself that he would never talk to Davis again. The movie was nominated for an Oscar, but the news about it was mostly about the big change in the cast. What could have been a chance to get along turned into another result of their fight. At this point, both women were getting too old to be in the center of Hollywood's attention. Younger starlets were taking on parts that used to be given to older stars. Studios that used to love them now see them as risks. But the story of their fight only got bigger. All the time, reporters asked them about each other. Fans talked about the insults they heard, and newspapers wrote about who won and who lost. More was going on with the truth. Both women were hurt and worn out, and they were still looking for work in a field that had changed. Even though time had passed, they were still able to throw grenades at each other from behind bars because of their competition. As Bette Davis talked about her work in May 1977, she was asked if she and Joan Crawford would ever get back together. "Why should I?" she asked with a mean laugh. She never said sorry. She is said to have said, "You should never say bad things about the dead," when she heard that Crawford had died the next year. Just say good. It is over for Joan Crawford. Okay. The insults spread quickly through talk shows and magazines. But that line, which some sources say she said on camera and others say she said in private, was only a small part of how she really felt. There were times when Bette's kindness toward her old foe was truly surprising. Bette stood up for Joan when Christina Crawford wrote her autobiography, Mommy Dearest, in 1978 and said her mother was mean. She said that even though they were enemies, she admired Joan's ability and thought it was horrible for a child to make such claims. She made it sound like the stresses Joan was under could drive any mother to the edge. You can see some understanding in that comment, maybe an awareness that both women had been called monsters and that their private lives had been used against them. She was also fair when she talked about how professional Crawford was. When she went on the Today Show in 1987, she told Bryant Gumbel that Crawford was always on time and ready for shooting Baby Jane. She said they never became friends, but she did say Joan knew her lines and did a good job on stage. The way Bette Davis said those words made them sound like praise. She could hate the person and still value the work. She learned over time that sharing insults kept their names alive, even though it made her tired to hold a grudge. Bette Davis had been through a stroke and a surgery by the late 1980s. She walked with a cane, and her voice, which used to be very fiery, was now rough, but her eyes still flashed with anger. In April 1989, she turned 81 years old and went on TV shows like David Letterman and Larry King. She knew she didn't have much time left, so she stopped making fun of Crawford and talked about how lonely it had been to be compared to another woman in a world full of men. She said that the competition had ruined her. She said it hurt. It hurt the relationships I had. She admitted that she had pushed Crawford away because she was afraid of losing parts. She also said that she cried after the Oscars because she felt ashamed, and that dragging Crawford across the floor during Baby Jane made her wonder if it was all worth it. She even hoped for a piece during the failed Sweet Charlotte shoot, but she didn't know how to start. She sighed and said that it was easy to hate then. People were shocked by these statements because they were honest and didn't contain any clever jabs. These last statements were so powerful because they made her seem like a real person. Bette admitted that she was mean and jealous, and she also saw that both women were stuck in a system that put female stars against each other. She thought about how things might have been different if there had been more jobs or less talk. When someone asked her if she'd forgiven Joan, she paused and said, "I don't know." Bette Davis passed away on October 6, 1989, not long after those events. She left behind acts that people will never forget and a fight that was the talk of the town for 50 years. Her last words about Joan Crawford were not insults. They were thoughts, statements of weakness, and acceptance of her part in what happened. Some of the mean things she had said or the pain she had caused or taken on were still there, but they gave a rare, honest look into the heart of a woman who had spent most of her life concealing behind a tough exterior. Conclusion: Hollywood loves a good feud because it makes money for them in the form of movies and magazines. But behind the scenes, there are messy, vulnerable people. Both Bette Davis and Joan Crawford were pushed to the top of their fields, but they were also put up against each other. Their fight was ugly, full of backstabbing and small-scale payback, and people were interested in it for decades. Many of the stories were true when Bette spoke out at age 81, and she added layers of pain that no one had thought of. She didn't give a reason for herself or her rival. Instead, she showed how they were both driven by fear and uncertainty. Hearing her last statement makes us remember that even legends are real people. They hurt, bleed, and feel bad about it. And sometimes the worst stories teach us the most about desire, envy, and what it costs to be successful.